So good evening, everybody. So tonight we're on to the last of the 7 talks in the Introducing Buddhism course. And tonight we're going to talk about meditation, why we meditate, how we meditate, and we'll do a very brief meditation so you get the idea. And then we'll just finish by talking about what you might do now that the course is completed, what to do next if you want to go on with a Buddhist practice. I'll give you some pointers as to various places that you might go after this. So we'll begin by talking about meditation, which is a very important part of Buddhist practice, although I should say that not every Buddhist school does meditate, but some place a very high emphasis on meditation. But why do we meditate in the first place? Well, one thing to remember is if you think back to the early part of the course, when you sat in your chairs for 10 or 15 minutes and just observed what was going on, everything is very, very noisy inside of our minds. It's a constant chatter. People talk about the monkey mind, the mind leaping from topic to topic like a monkey. And most of the time, we don't actually even know that this is happening because we don't perceive thoughts as being objects in consciousness, like, for example, sounds or sights or smells. We invest thoughts with something more special. We think these are my thoughts. In fact, we think this is me. And this is the problem, is that we are thinking, not actually knowing that we're thinking. The thoughts are like little cars coming along past us on a motorway, and rather than just observing those thoughts, we hitch a ride and get carried off wherever the car is going and get lost and end up not knowing where we are. So there's a very big difference between getting lost in your thoughts, in other words, thinking without knowing that you're thinking, and being able to step back and observe your thoughts and observe them a little bit more dispassionately, rather than thinking, this is very important, I'm thinking, this is me, this is my thought processes, and getting lost in it, just being a little bit more dispassionate about it and letting those thoughts come and go. Because if we want to understand our minds, we have to sit down and observe our minds. And what will become clear to us as we get more proficient at doing this is that there are certain patterns of thought, action, certain behaviors that lead to an increase in happiness for us and other people. And there are thoughts, behaviors, actions which lead to suffering for ourselves and for others. So if we can cultivate awareness of our thoughts and our behaviors and what the consequence of those things is, that will enable us to make more skillful, more wise judgments about what we're going to do in life. And this is a quote from the Buddha from a book of the Buddha's teachings called the Dharma. These are the first 2 verses from the Dharma. The Buddha said, all that we are is the result of what we have thought. It is founded on our thoughts. It is made up of our thoughts. If a man speaks or acts with an evil thought, pain follows him, as the wheel follows the foot of the ox that draws the carriage. If a man speaks or acts with a pure thought, happiness follows him, like a shadow that never leaves him. But the problem is that we can't understand, we can't see things as clearly as the Buddha saw those things, because we are suffering from this very powerful state of delusion, ignorance, this lack of the ability to see things clearly. And of course, one of the most important consequences of that deluded way of thinking is that we mistake our experience for this I, this me, this ego, the chief executive officer who's sitting in here running things. So we see the thought, we become aware of thoughts, and we imagine that there is an I who is thinking them. And unfortunately, that strong attachment to that sense of I, me, and mine as something that's separate from everything else, something perhaps that has a permanent existence, that leads to suffering. So we need to try and cut through that deluded way of thinking and start to see things more clearly. And meditation is one of the tools that we can use to become much more aware of what's going on inside, in our inside consciousness, and try to act in a more skillful way, a more harmonious way going forward. But people say a lot about meditation. There's a huge amount of classes and literature and apps out there, and people attribute all sorts of marvelous things to meditation. And unfortunately, none of those things are actually going to happen for you. Meditation is a very physical and actually quite an arduous physical activity to undertake. It's not anything to do with chakras and golden bowls and astral planes. So dismiss all that from your mind. It is simply taking time to become aware of what's happening in our lives right now, and practicing how to do that, and becoming aware principally of what's happening in our minds, in our thoughts, and becoming more aware and therefore behaving more skillfully in the future. Now, traditionally in Buddhist practice, we talk about 5 hindrances to a meditation practice, and these are the 5 hindrances: ill will, sensory desire, restlessness and worry, doubt, that's doubt about the practice, and sloth and torpor. And any of you who've ever done any meditation, particularly if you've done a long sitting, you will have experienced every single one of these 5 hindrances over and over again. So particularly sloth and torpor, if you're meditating and you're tired, sometimes it's almost irresistible to nod off and fall asleep. Restlessness can be almost irresistible when you're sitting on your cushion meditating. You just think, I can't bear it for another minute. I need to get up, I need to move, I need to go. Sensory desire, so that's usually manifests as not wanting the unpleasant sensation of sitting on the cushion or on the chair, because it can sometimes, if you do it for a long time, be painful. And then, of course, ill will, hostility, anger, annoyance, and doubt. Sometimes, why am I doing this? Is there any point? Where is this going? So those are the 5 hindrances, and this is a traditional part of Buddhist teaching. And the hindrances are also described in the sense that when we are trying to see things clearly, we want our minds to be clear. That is likened to a pond full of clear, still water. And you can see clearly through the water to the bottom of the pond. So we can see clearly into what's happening in our minds, in our experience. But if our seeing is obstructed by ill will, that is likened to the idea that the water is boiling and bubbling up, and that stops you seeing clearly into it. Sloth and torpor, that's water that's become stagnant, it's full of slimy moss, and again you can't see things clearly. Restlessness is water that's ruffled, the surface is ruffled by the wind. Doubt, that's water in a dark place. And sensory desire, that's water that's got some coloured tinge to it. And again, that stops you seeing. So these 5 hindrances will ultimately have to be addressed in our meditation practice, because as sure as anything, you're going to come across these things often more than one occasion, and all of, more than one of the hindrances. So we cultivate some ways of trying to address those things, because the idea is to try and let that water still, let the ruffles settle, let the sediment settle down. That means letting our minds, letting everything calm down, quieten down, settle down, so that we can start to see things clearly without being beguiled and captivated by thoughts coming and going and carrying us away. So some of the things that we cultivate to try and address those 5 hindrances are described as the 5 guiding faculties, and they're here with the Sanskrit names. Faith or confidence, again, that's faith in the practice, that counteracts the hindrance of doubt. Effort, virya, we came across that as one of the parameters, and this counteracts the hindrance of sloth and torpor. Samadhi or concentration. Wisdom, so that's seeing things clearly. And overall mindfulness or awareness. And those 5 guiding faculties are sometimes likened to the fingers and thumb on a hand. And you can see here that the thumb is faith. That's faith in the practice, faith in the Buddhist teachings, faith that there is a reason to do this, that this isn't all just bogus. And faith is a very important part of our practice, and that's why it's represented by the thumb here, which is the strongest of the digits and supports all the others. But you can see that mindfulness is the central finger, which basically balances out the other fingers, the other faculties of effort, concentration, and wisdom. So those are the 5 guiding faculties. But let's talk a little bit now about how you actually do a meditation practice. And I'm going to show you some pictures in a moment. But one thing I want to say is that any amount of meditation is better than none at all. So it's better to do some, even if it's not very much, even if it's a short period of sitting, rather than doing none. And the second thing to say is that having a regular commitment is more important than having, one massive effort once a month and then nothing at all. You really need to be putting this in as a daily effort. And of course, it is difficult to start with, and that's why it's called a meditation practice. It won't be easy as you get started with this. And quite a lot of people say when they start meditation, I'm just getting more and more confused. There's more stuff going on. I can't even, concentrate for 2-3 minutes. It's ridiculous. And that's simply you're just becoming aware of what's going on there already, what's going on in your mind all the time. But you're no longer thinking without knowing that you're thinking. You actually started to tune in to what's going on there because you're observing it. There are various types of meditation, but lots of different types of meditation practice. But the one that most people will begin with, and that I do strongly recommend that you begin with, is simply focusing on something, a meditation anchor. And for many people, we use the breath, and that's simply to try and settle down and train the mind to focus on something rather than scattering here, there, and everywhere. So the practice we'll be trying tonight will be a type of vipassana meditation, which is simply learning how to concentrate on our breath and focus on our breathing. But before we go on to the practice and have a go, what I'd like you to do is have a think about your meditation posture. And this is actually very important. I'm going to show you some types of meditation posture that you might want to think about adopting. And one of the main things about meditation is that the spine needs to be upright, and you need to keep a little bit of a bend in the lumbar spine, a little bit of a curve in the lumbar spine, but the spine needs to be upright. The head needs to be above the hips, and the knees are on the floor, setting this really very sturdy and stable tripod. So there are 3 points of balance here: the seat bones on the cushion and the 2 knees on the floor. Now, this woman's obviously a very experienced meditator, and she's sitting in a full lotus posture. So she's got both of her legs crossed, each foot on the thigh of the opposite leg. I want to just be clear with you and say that almost nobody I've ever met can sit in this way. So don't think if you can't sit in a full lotus, that's it. Your Buddhist practice is ruined forever. Believe me, most of us don't do it. I'll show you some other ways in a moment. You'll notice she's got a little cushion under her bottom to raise that a few inches off the ground, and that's important because that means her hips are slightly higher than her knees, and that makes her more stable. She's sitting vertically, and if you look at her from the front, she's not tilting to one side or the other, and she's got her hands folded in her lap. Now, it doesn't matter whether you fold your hands like so, whether you just fold them together, sort of grab one thumb with the other hand and hold them together, or whether you have this mudra as she has there. You can try either way. I've tried both ways over the years. But as long as your hands are resting in your lap, and ideally with a little bit of support so that your arms aren't hanging down and pulling down on your shoulders. So if you want to just pull a little bit of fold out from your trousers, or even put a little tiny cushion there just to make sure that your hands have a little bit of support, that will help you. So she's sitting in a full lotus, and good for her. This is a half lotus. So this man, also very good posture here. He's got one foot on the opposite thigh, and the other one tucked along underneath him. So this is a half lotus, which is also a very perfectly good way to sit. Again, you'll see he's got the cushion under his bottom. He's sitting perfectly straight. You put a little bit of, just raise the back of your head just a little bit, as if you are pushing your neck back against your collar, and the chin you should get this feeling you could hold an orange under your chin. The eyes can be closed, but more often we just lower the eyes to look at an object about a meter ahead of us on the floor. So your eyes are almost closed, but not quite closed. The mouth is relaxed, the tongue resting lightly against the roof of the mouth or against the front teeth, the back of the top teeth. And again, he's got the mudra with his hands there. This is how I sit. This is called Burmese fashion. So just the legs are crossed, but you can see that the knees are touching the cushions. The knees are touching the cushion, and again, the little cushion behind. Now, if you can't manage to do a lotus or a half lotus or sit in a Burmese style, it's perfectly reasonable to kneel. So many people will kneel up, and something needs to be under your bottom to support you. So that could either be a couple of meditation cushions, or, as in this case here, a little meditation stool. And again, you can see the very firm tripod, the bottom and the 2 knees making this little tripod that keeps you stable on the cushion. The back is vertical, the head is above the hips, and there's a little bit of stretch on the back of the neck, and just a relaxation in the chin there. If you can't manage to sit on a cushion, and many of us as we get older and arthritis starts to settle in, we can't manage a cushion. It's perfectly fine to sit on a chair. I would not have this chair sitting on my cushion if I was in this meditation hall, but there it is. So sit on a chair, but I wouldn't put it on a cushion, put it on the floor. If you must have, if you must have a cushion behind your back because you've got a bad back, then that's okay, but it's better not to. It's better to sit upright on the chair. And actually, you need to get your knees a little lower than your hips. And in order to achieve this, most people will need to shuffle forward just to the edge of the seat. And the knees are separated, the hips, the feet are below the knees, again, forming that very stable tripod. So we're going to have a little go now. So we're all sitting in chairs. So I'd like you to get your chairs set up as we have in the last picture. I'd like you to sit towards the front of the chair. And separate your feet hip width apart. Make sure that your feet are under your knees. And then just find a position where your head and your shoulders are vertically above your hips. Bring your hands to your lap. You can either fold them, take the thumb in the palm of the opposite hand and hold it, or you can have that little mudra we saw where the one palm is flat, the other palm is resting on the top of the opposite palm, and the two thumbs come up and touch above. Make sure your head is above your hips and just put a little bit of stretch into the back of your neck. Just lift it an inch or two as if you are pushing your collar back against, pushing your neck back against the back of your collar. Your chin, you should feel as if you could hold a little orange or something like that between your chin and your chest. Drop your eyes to the floor and look at a point about 1 meter in front of you. Let your lids lower down. You can close your eyes if you wish, but probably better to keep them open, otherwise it's easy to drift away or nod off. Keep your jaw relaxed. Let your tongue rest against the back of your front teeth. And to start with, what we're going to do is just take a breath in and let it go. Breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. And I'd like you to focus on the breath as carefully as you can. Think about which part of the body do you feel the breath in most intensely. Is it in your nostrils? Is it in your chest? Is it in the rising and the falling of your abdomen? Wherever you feel it most, focus your attention there. And it's helpful to do a little count on the breath. So breathing in, and as you breathe out, think 1. Breathing in, breathing out, think 2. Keep going like that. And if you find that you are lost in thought and you suddenly realize that you've been thinking about something and not actually meditating, that's fine. Just come back to the breathing and start again at 1. And if you do get as far as 10, counting the out breaths, then just go back to 1. Okay. Okay. So just gently now coming back to the room, just gently easing out of that. So one thing to say about meditation is, even if you haven't meditated before, it can be quite challenging to do. So I would suggest, if you're starting a meditation practice, that you just start by doing just 5 minutes, and then little by little build up to 10 minutes and so on. In the Zen school, where meditation is a very important part of our practice, but each meditation period is usually 30 minutes, and you might sit in a group for an hour and a half, so 3 30-minute sessions. But to begin with, that will be quite challenging if you've not meditated before. So I would say start with 5 minutes, build up to 10 minutes, and build up until you can do 30 minutes in a stretch. It's very important to do this every day. and to do it ideally at the same time every day to make a real habit of it. I mean, I like to meditate first thing in the morning because I'm feeling alert and fresh at that time in the morning. Some people like to meditate in the evening. It doesn't matter when, but the most important thing is that you do it, and that you do it on a daily basis. I've just given you a little taster of it here, but there are many, many classes the Society holds, and I'm going to tell you about some of them a little bit later in the talk. One thing just to say, there are lots of pitfalls of meditation. We fall into all sorts of strange thoughts about it. And one of the things to remember is that we're not trying to stop the thoughts coming, because you can't do that. That would be like stopping yourself hearing something or stopping yourself feeling something. The thoughts come and they go. The object of the practice is to let them come and let them go, but not get carried away with them. So the goal is not to have a completely empty mind with no thoughts in it at all. That wouldn't be possible, but simply to not be attached to those thoughts and not to invest them with special power and significance and get carried away with them. So that's the first thing to say, is that it's not about stopping the thoughts. The second thing to say is don't fall into the trap of judging your meditation practice, saying, oh, that was a really good one, or oh, that was a rubbish meditation, I'm such a terrible meditator, because that's just building up that sense of I, that sense of my own importance. Just let's accept each session as it is, and don't try to say, oh, that's a really good one, that's a really bad one. Don't judge your meditation. Here's another cautionary tale. So this is the story of the brick and the mirror. And this is a story from which goes back to one of the old Zen masters. He observed one of his students who was sitting in meditation all day, every day, really working very hard at this. So one day the Zen master came and sat down next to the student and picked up a brick and started rubbing it on the ground. And eventually the student said, "Master, what are you doing?" And the Zen master said, I'm polishing the brick because I want to make it into a mirror. And the student said, "Master, no amount of polishing is going to turn a brick into a mirror." And the Zen master said, yes, and no amount of sitting in meditation is going to turn a clod into a Buddha. So although meditation is a very important part of our practice, it is not the sole part of our practice. There is another part of the practice which I'm going to come on to in a moment. And although you can do meditation courses and use apps and things and do meditation completely separate from a Buddhist practice, and that's fine, it's good for stress reduction, etc., etc. Meditation is so much more than just an executive stress ball. It really is something that has to be part of your Buddhist practice, where you're following the other elements of the Noble Eightfold Path and trying to live a good life and trying to see things clearly, etc. It's not just about sitting quietly on a cushion. That's one element, but it isn't the be all and end all of what we do in a Buddhist practice. So what else do? We do something called daily life practice. So if you're going to start a Buddhist practice, and believe me, you don't need to, one of the things from this course is I don't expect you all to go off and become Buddhists. Believe me, I'm not getting any commission on this. If you can use what you've been taught on this course to become a better whatever you are, that's sufficient. You don't have to use what you've learned on the course to become a Buddhist, but if you want to use it to become a better parent, teacher, Christian, that's also fine. But if you want to fit into a Buddhist practice, then as well as meditation. That is simply one part of it. The other part of it is something called daily life practice. So just to keep this very, very simple, but this is what I was taught when I started my Buddhist practice. The elements of daily life practice are these. Number one, setting up a timetable. Now, we had a go at this very early on, didn't we? We set ourselves a bedtime and we tried to follow it, and we tried to see what was our resistance to fitting in with a pattern. But it's good to have a structure to your day, a timetable with some very simple things in it. What time to get up, what time to go to bed, what time to do your meditation, perhaps what time to have your meals. That's all that needs to be done. And see if you can follow it and stick to it. Because as we learned early on, when we make ourselves little rules that we have to follow, like a strict bedtime or a time for getting up, etc., we try to wangle our way around them and struggle against it. Although the timetable is a very important part of particularly a Zen practice, it can be incredibly difficult to adhere to. So a simple timetable: this is when I get up, this is when I go to bed, this is when I meditate, and this is when I eat my meals. And that's all. It doesn't need to be more elaborate than that. The second thing to do in your daily life practice is something called working with the fires. Now, we talked about these three fires many times over the course. We talked about delusion, aversion, and wanting things or attachment to things. And once you start thinking about this, when you start, particularly when you become more aware through a meditation practice, you will realize how much of our days we are swayed by these fires, these passions, these energies, which can be all-consuming. We get angry about something and we fly off the handle. We want something and we start whinging or grabbing or angling how to get it. The point of working with the fires is that we don't deny the existence of these things. We don't say, I'm now a Buddhist, I must never feel wrath again. I'm now a Buddhist, I'm never going to have a chocolate biscuit. That's missing the point. The point is that we acknowledge that these energies, these fires, these passions, these poisons are there, that we are being swayed by anger, by likes and dislikes, wanting, not wanting. We acknowledge these things, we give them house room, but we don't get carried away by them. And we try over time and with repeated practice to gentle those things so that, yes, you can feel cross about something, but it doesn't mean you have to slam the door, shout, have a tantrum about something. You don't need to do that. If you can hold that passion, that energy, keep hold of it without it erupting into bad behavior or unkind words or anything of that sort, just hold it. It will dissipate because everything comes to be and ceases to be. Nothing is permanent. The energy will dissipate, and a little bit of that delusion of I, a little bit of that sense of myself will be eroded by it. So the point of the practice and building awareness is to become aware of these energies and allow them to be there, but not to allow them to carry us away. And I'll give you a story which is an example of that. So the story concerns a samurai back in the days of the Shogun Empire in Japan. This samurai decided one day that he didn't want to be a samurai anymore. He wanted to be a Zen monk. So he left the employ of his lord, his shogun, and went off to be a Zen monk. Now, this was a terrible, terrible thing to do because the samurai had sworn allegiance to their lord. They were there to protect him to the death. And for a samurai to give up his practice and go away and do something else was absolutely unthinkable. But he did. He left and he went off to become a Zen monk and trained for a number of years in a monastery. And one day he was walking away from the monastery on the road when he met one of his former samurai colleagues, one of his former comrades, who saw him and immediately recognized him and said, "There is a man who's brought great shame upon us." So he pulled his sword and was just about to strike off the head of the monk. And he suddenly thought, he said, "No, it's not even worth soiling my sword with your blood. I'm going to," he sheathed the sword again and he spat in the face of the Zen monk and went on his way. And then the Zen monk just wiped away the spittle. And then he reflected and he thought, I was a samurai myself. I trained for all of those years. And before I started my Zen training, I would never have allowed this to happen, allow someone to spit in my face. I would have reacted, and now it means nothing to me. And he then realized that the Zen training had brought about a great change in him. And he said, "The way is the same way as of old. Verily, what has changed is my own heart." And he bowed in deep gratitude in the direction of the monastery where his teacher was. And you might think, well, that's a very nice story, but what does it mean for me today? Well, I'll tell you an example of this. So I know you will find this impossible to believe, but I used to be a very bad-tempered person. One day I used to have a little scooter, and I was one day traveling down one of the A roads coming back to work, and a driver cut me up on the slip road. He cut me up, zoomed past me, and I chased after him on my scooter, virtually banging on his window. How simply road rage. I mean, he cut me up. Yes, he was in the wrong, but I reacted so badly. Now, honestly, I really don't think I'd do that now. I really don't think I'd do that now. Little by little by little by little, with a Buddhist practice, you can learn to contain that energy, that annoyance. You don't have to discharge it in shouting and swearing and racing up the road to chase the driver, or slamming the door, or getting home and ranting about it. You can just hold those energies, hold them, hold them, hold them. They dissipate. And as they dissipate, they burn away a little bit of I, a little bit of that sense of me and my own importance. So working with the fires. So once you've settled into your meditation practice and become a little bit aware, you'll become aware of just what a seething hotbed of liking and disliking and hating and wanting. It's very, very common for students who begin a Buddhist practice to go to their teacher after a month or so and say, "This is making me worse. Everything's getting worse. I'm just getting so angry with everything, and everything makes me so angry." And the teacher says, "Good, very, very good, very, very good." They always say that. And the reason they say that is it's not because you become worse, you become a really bad person through doing your Buddhist practice. You become aware of all of this stuff that was always going on, but you weren't aware of it because you weren't really focused on what was happening. You weren't, you were just carried here and there by your emotions and passions. When you finally start to see them, you think, "Oh my goodness, I'm awful, aren't I?" But then you can start working with them, and these energies, these fires, these passions start to damp down, to calm down, and actually to transform. Through our practice, we can transform these fires, these energies. We can transform ignorance into wisdom. We can transform aversion into compassion. We can transform attachment into equanimity. That's the goal of what we're trying to do with our practice, is to not to kill these fires completely, but to transform them into those warm, compassionate things that form the basis of the human heart. And then the third thing, giving myself wholeheartedly into what at this moment is being done. Now, there are lots of things I give myself wholeheartedly into because they're things I quite like doing. So if you like reading a book or watching a film, it's very easy to be completely lost in that activity. It absorbs you and you think, oh, I love doing this because, you know, it really totally absorbs me. You've given yourself into it. There are certain things that we don't like doing. I have a particular thing about ironing. I actually hate ironing. So when it's time to do the ironing, I don't want to give myself wholeheartedly into the ironing. I actually want to forget that the ironing's happening, and I want to either listen to music, or I might have a phone conversation with someone while I'm doing it, or, you know, you might end up watching TV. In other words, that little bit of your life when you're spending the time ironing, you've just basically ignored it and you're doing something else. You're not actually doing the ironing. You're not actually doing the washing up. Your mind is elsewhere. In other words, you're not living your life now, today. You're just dreaming your way through it. And the funny thing is that when we do things that we really like, that we do get wholeheartedly engaged with, you know, rock climbing or painting or whatever, we think, oh, I love that activity. It's not that you love the activity, it's just that you have so wholeheartedly given yourself into it. You've lost that little sense of I just for a moment, you've forgotten it, and you're just doing the thing. You know, athletes call it flow. You're in the flow, you're doing this thing and you're loving it. It is possible to love the ironing if you give yourself wholeheartedly into it and do it without having the radio on or having a phone call or whatever, but you have to do it. And so another element of the Buddhist practice is to give yourself wholeheartedly into whatever is happening now, whether it's doing the washing up, whether it's listening to me talking, whatever it is you're doing, just do it with the full attention and awareness, rather than your mind being away in the clouds. Your body is sitting here, your hands are mechanically wiping the plates or doing the dishes, but your mind is away. Because if you do that, you're not living your life, you know. You need to be here and now, and you need to practice doing that with the things that you don't like as well as with the things that you do like. So that's the third element, if you like, of simply daily life practice. So timetable, set up a timetable and keep to it. Work with those passions, those energies, those fires, become aware of them, give them house room. In other words, let them be there, but don't get carried away by them. Don't let them erupt into thoughts, bad behavior. Just hold them and they will go, and you will become stronger through that practice of doing that. And then finally, just be there doing whatever you're doing, whether it's ironing, washing up, watching a television program, just do it. Don't be half aware of, half watching the TV and half on your iPhone. Just focus on what you're doing, give yourself into it. And in that way, you'll be living your life rather than simply dreaming your way through it. So just finishing off what one might do next. Well, what you might do next is you might want to join the Buddhist Society. It's very good rates, and you get access to the courses that are for members as well as those that are just for everyone. You get a journal, the middle way. So do join the Buddhist Society if you would like to. But what are the next stages after this introductory course? Well, the course that used to be called the intermediate course, so the next one to go on to, is now called the First Turning of the Wheel. And this is an 8-week course which studies the Buddha's teaching. So the sutras, the important teachings of the Buddha, and that's delivered, I think it's on a weekday lunchtime. I think Deirdre Cunningham is delivering that course now. So if you want to start reading some of the actual sutras, the things written around the time, written, the things that the Buddha said, what they actually mean, that's a good course to go on. I can't speak highly enough of the Buddhist Society Summer School, which is really absolutely terrific. So this is a residential week which is held every August in the Cotswolds. It's actually held in the Royal Agricultural College in near Cirencester. And it's a week of talks, meditation, some time strolling in the countryside. It's not a strict retreat. It's quite a relaxed atmosphere. It's more like a holiday for Buddhists. The Royal Agricultural College is a lovely place to stay, and it's a lovely part of the country to be. And that week will give you a really thorough background in basic Buddhist teachings and the opportunity to do some meditation practice and to meet fellow Buddhists as well. So I can't speak highly enough of that. Of course, we weren't able to hold it last year or this year because of COVID, but hopefully next year that will be up and running again. So those are courses. What about classes? Well, there's lots of meditation classes, and I really strongly encourage you to look at some of these. So there are two short, Friday and Monday, there are lunchtime meditation classes for about 40 minutes or so. Monday one run by Richard Bober and the Friday one by Deirdre Cunningham. There's a short Dharma talk and then a short meditation sitting of around 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And then there's a meditation evening every Thursday evening run by Colin Ash, which is a very, very good class as well. So if you want to do some meditation with the Buddhist Society, then these are very good classes to join. You don't have to be a society member to join them. At the moment, they're over Zoom because of COVID, but ultimately you'll be able to come to the society and sit with other people. If you want to go down some of the more specialist routes and start pursuing the meditation and start learning about some of the other schools of Buddhism, the Buddhist Society offers all the different schools. You can start your practice in any of the different schools through the Buddhist Society classes. So the Theravada class meets on a Monday evening, and that's for members only. The Zen class, well, there are Zen classes on a Sunday morning, which are open to the public. There's a Zazen class on Monday evenings for beginners, which is members only, but for beginners with no experience really of Zen or of meditation. And there are monthly Zen Sundays, which are open to everyone as well. And again, at the moment, these are all over Zoom, but back, once things settle down, these will be you'll be able to come and join these in person. Tibetan meditation classes are held on a Thursday evening, and again, they're open to all. And there are Pure Land classes on occasional Sunday afternoons, and you can find through the Buddhist Society website the dates and times of all the courses that are coming up and the classes that are coming up. But you don't have to do this all through the Buddhist Society. If you want to go elsewhere, there's plenty out there. So I've just put down some of the ones that are easily accessible for people who live in London. So if you want to explore the Theravada school, probably one of the best places to start would be with Amaravati, which is a Thai forest monastery out in, I think it's in Berkshire. So that would be a very good place to go if you are interested in the Theravadins. The Tibetan school, well, I put here the reference for the Jamyang Buddhist Tibetan Society, which is based in an old courthouse down near Elephant and Castle. And Roy Sutherwood, who also teaches this class, is one of the teachers there. The Pure Land class, well, you might start with the Three Wheels organization, which is based in Acton. And the Zen classes. The Zen classes are quite strong in the Buddhist Society, quite a lot of Zen practitioners in the Buddhist Society. And as well as classes at the Buddhist Society, the other place that the Zen group meet is up in St. John's Wood at the Rinzai Zen Center called Shabuan, and that is their website, and that's their Zendo. So those are the places you can go from here. So just to finish by reminding you of the principles of Buddhist practice, and they're actually very simple. It can be summed up in these very simple words: ceasing to do evil, cultivating the good, purifying the heart. This is the teaching of all the Buddhas. So that's it. That's the end of the course. I shall stop sharing my screen, and we've just got 2 minutes left. We can take a couple of questions if there are any. Otherwise, I'm going to say you need to try it out for yourselves.
Hello, Rachel, and thanks a lot for this lesson. All right. So we have a nice comment from one of our participants who is saying that following the homework that you gave, so practicing bowing made them feel like they were authentic Buddhists, which is really nice.
Yes,
I think.
Bowing's so good, isn't it? So good.
And a question from the same person who's asking, I've always meditated with the back of my wrist resting on my knees, palms up. Should I change this positioning of my hands?
No, if that works for you, and if your shoulders are not under strain, if that's comfortable, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry, just scrolling through the messages. We have a question here, which is asking, in a work professional context, do you not make yourself open to being taken advantage of by colleagues or bosses if you just accept everything and endure? I.e., you'll be thought of as a pushover, which is also applicable to life in general. And the second question is, when you allow the fires to be and to dissipate, how exactly does your sense of I and self erode little by little?
So in the first question, I'll tell you a story, if I can remember it. So the story concerns a Buddhist teacher and a student are talking, and the student says that he had been out walking and someone had attacked him and tried to steal his cloak or steal something from him. And he said, what should I have done, master? What should I have done? And the Buddhist teacher said, I would have taken my umbrella and I would have whacked him over the head. And the student said, well, how can you do that? You're a Buddhist teacher. And the teacher said, well, I would have whacked him over the head with loving kindness. And the truth is that you don't have to be a pushover. You don't have to just accept what everybody says. But there's a difference, accept everything that's put upon you. But there's a difference between saying, no, I can't do that, and saying, no, I can't do that. Or worse, saying, yeah, all right then, and deeply resenting it. What's important in life is to be honest, to be kind. And if you can't do something, just say, I can't do it. Don't say, okay, and be really resentful about it. And similarly, if you can't do it, you don't have to say, and you always ask me to do these things and you know I'm so busy, this is typical of you. You can see there's a difference between simply seeing the circumstance and having an appropriate response, and seeing the situation and having a completely ridiculously selfish or angry or response. So getting the balance right, but certainly dealing with people skillfully and appropriately and kindly and compassionately, but not necessarily giving in and doing all the things other people want if you can't or shouldn't. So it's getting the balance right. So working with the fires was the other thing. Yes, that's right. The fires, the passions, it is said the passions are the Buddha nature and the Buddha nature is the passions. Those energies, this precious energy, these fires are part of our Buddha nature, but we are using them unskillfully by just letting them flare up and erupt and rip apart everything around us. If you can hold and contain and gentle and still and settle those passions and energies down, we don't want to get rid of those energies. We don't want to become automata who have no feelings, nothing stirs us up, but we don't want to be carried away by those things. So I'll tell you another Zen story. There was a very senior monk in the monastery who was very, very, the younger monks were very intimidated by him because he was so calm, he was so austere, everything about him was so, he was so, his practice was so well developed, and the monks were a bit scared. But one day they decided to play a trick on him, and the senior monk's role was to go around the monastery in the morning with the little tea tray and going to each of the shrines around the monastery and setting out the tea in front of each of the shrines. So he's working his way down the corridors, and the young monks have decided they're going to hide around a corner. And as he goes down the corridor, they leap out at him and go, "Rah!" And he just carries on walking with the tea down the corridor. And as soon as he gets to the next alcove and goes around the corner, he goes, "Ah, I've never been so frightened in my life." So the point is, you are allowed to feel emotions, you're allowed to feel these energies, but you mustn't let them carry you away. So we gentle them, we work with them so that we are not enslaved by those energies. It is perfectly fine to want something or to not want something, but when that becomes an overwhelming dislike or an overwhelming clinging attachment and we've lost all reason through it, then it's gone too far. But we certainly don't want to become people with no thoughts, no feelings, no emotions, but we still them, we gentle them, we transform them so that we can use these energies in a wholesome, skillful way rather than a hurtful, unpleasant way that causes suffering. I hope that's answered the question.
Thanks very much, Rachel. There are lots and lots of messages just saying thank you, Rachel. Everybody found this course very inspiring and everybody seems really happy about it. So I just wanted to say that.
Lovely. Well, in that case, we'll wrap up for now, and I shall wish you all luck with your journey down your Buddhist practice, should you choose to go there, and I look forward to seeing you at the Society. Bye for now. Take care.